All right. Well, welcome everyone to our fourth office hour. Welcome to 2023 as well. We hope you guys had a great 2022. We're focusing on bigger and better for 2023. Once again, I'm Dan. I'm your host, coming live from my bedroom. I've got my dog Waffles here, monitoring the situation to make sure everything's moving along smoothly. And that we are coming in under an hour, which is why we call it an office hour, not office hours. So today, I, of course, have my partners, Ivan Vian and Tariq Satar, with me. And we're going to talk about property-specific due diligence. So with that, I'd like to really just get us kicked off. Thank you to everybody that already sent us questions in advance. Once again, if you do have questions during the webinar, just put it in the side chat. I'll capture it. And if we do not get to it, I will follow up with you personally the next day. So thank you again. Let's get started. And to get started, let me just pop up our deck real fast. And we're just going to jump right into it. In order to consolidate it this time around, I consolidated a lot of people's questions into specific slides. This might fit more of our general basis. And I'll read through them very quickly, but then Ivan, Tariq, I'd love for you guys to jump in and provide the color commentary necessary. So if I'm a passive investor, these are some of the questions I might be thinking about. What is the age of the property? Has the property been renovated? And if so, when? Percentage of units that have already been renovated, the class type of the property, and how that aligns with the surrounding area. So who wants to go first on this one?
Right. Hey, Dan. So, with regards to these type of questions, honestly, a lot of these questions you can answer before the due diligence inspections even kick off as part of the feasibility process as you're underwriting the deal. And you're going through and understanding exactly what type of asset that you're buying, and then how does that compare to other like-kind assets in the submarket that it is in. Again, you had on the age of the asset, because different assumptions are associated with different type of asset classes. So a lot of these things you can determine pre-inspection. And maybe you can keep the questions on there too, as we're kind of answering them. It can help me walk through.
Right. I'll just add on a couple of items that were on there with reference to the class of the property and the surrounding area. So things that we look at there is just the demographic. What kind of demographic there is, and what kind of income level and median household income especially, and what rental level is realistic. You look at the comps, what has been renovated in the comps, what opportunity do you have in this particular asset that you're looking at compared to the assets in the area. So all of those things are important to look at ahead of, as Ivan said earlier, ahead of the on-site diligence. These are things that can be done off-site, but having a knowledge of the submarket is helpful, and a lot of the data that you're going to need to do, some of this analysis can be just captured online.
Correct. And so when you have this data captured before you go in and inspect the property, then you go and set up the inspections, and you go put your eyes on each of the interior units and validate what you have understood in the beginning. So when it comes to percentage of the units, validate if that percentage is correct, because you're physically putting your eyes at every single unit. And when you go in and do these interior inspections, whoever you use, they usually should have a very methodical process. A lot of times we have people who have a Google Sheet or some type of iPad that captures the data and pictures of every single unit. And they go into every single interior unit, take the pictures, they make note of what type of fixtures, what type of cabinets it has, what type of flooring, etc. And they consolidate all that information at the very end to determine how much it's going to truly cost to upgrade these units to your given scope that you choose to upgrade them to. When it comes to the when its property has been renovated, and so when, again, you're going to go in and validate that. They may tell you in the broker's offering memorandum, it has a brand new roof, but you go put your eyes on the roof with a licensed roofer or an experienced roofer, and you realize, hey, the roof is actually 10 years old, or hey, it has significant hail damage, and now guess what? You're going to have to replace that roof or work out some type of negotiation with the seller to get credit for a damaged roof. that has happened quite a few times on a lot of our inspections. When it comes to the like office renovations, we're going to go and validate that. Not just office, you probably already have known that before you go into the property, but the specific areas of office. Maybe they have a weight room and you want to go take a look at the weight room. When it comes to the laundry area, has the laundry area been renovated or not? So those are some of the things you definitely want to understand before going in, so you can go in and compare apples to apples when you're taking a look at the property. What else? What is the class of the property and how does that align with the surrounding area and tenant class? Again, as Tariq indicated, that is something you do up front during the feasibility portion of it. But when you're going through due diligence, of course, you would have already shot the comps, but usually during due diligence, we go and shop the comps again to make sure everything kind of correlates and everything's making sense when you put your eyes on the comps. A lot of times when people do comp studies, they may do a phone call thinking to get true data, but actually go and secret shop these properties in the surrounding area to get and put your eyes on those interior units of the surrounding comps to make sure you have a good apples to apples comparison of what your true comp data is going to be.
On that note, what I will add is that early on in our days, we would try to go into these comps posing as a potential tenant to try to capture some of this data. You do not need to do that. We just walk into the office as someone that is buying an asset in the area, and people are, other than one instance where I got a call back from the regional and I got the data later, but in every other instance, people have been very willing, very forthcoming with the information. They take us to their model unit, their, any empty units that we may want to look at. They're very willing to share the rent roll, the pricing, all of that data. So there's no need to pose as a potential tenant. You can just walk in as a buyer and then get the information.
Absolutely. And a little trick that I use, Tariq, is I say, hey, I heard you're the best in class of property management company in this area. So we want to come and learn from the best. And when you present it like that, then it's an open book from that point onward. And they'll show you everything that you want to see in that property. Excellent.
All right. Well, I like that. Great answers, guys. I've got nothing additional to add there. So we're going to move right along, keep ourselves on track. The next question, this is really zeroed in on dollars and cents, but it's for people trying to understand, for instance, what's going to be the replacement cost of the property, what's the purchase price or the cost per unit on the purchase price, what's the construction costs, and sorry that's a little bit blended there, but construction cost per square foot or the cost per unit. Why is that an important thing for us to be very upfront with passive investors on what that really looks like?
Right, Tariq?
Yeah, I can tackle that. It's, every market, and then within the market, the sub-market, the pricing and in the multifamily space that we look at, it is more on a per unit basis that you look at. Per square foot cost is more in other commercial spaces, and maybe in development is more relevant. But on a cost per unit basis, it's going to vary significantly for the various classes of the asset. And then based on the market and the sub-market, the median household income, the condition of the property, the mechanicals, what has been upgraded. So all of that plays into how much you're paying and what you are planning to do with the asset. And then there, as you go through the process, there's going to be an appraisal of the property that is going to be done for the lender. And there's going to be an as-is valuation that will be allocated or assigned to it. And then there will be an as-completed valuation. So the as-is and as-completed, as-is is you would want that to be at least, if not better than your purchase price on your per unit purchase price. And then as completed, you really want it to reflect the improvements that you're making, the investment that you're making into that asset on a per unit basis, and then what the outcome and the result is in terms of the enhanced value, the improved value of the asset. So, we have been GPs in properties where, we purchase a property at a little over 100,000 a door in Phoenix, which market has been very, very strong over the years, and sold it a couple of years later, just about 2 years later, more than double, so more than 200,000 a unit. But everything else that was transacting in that area at that time frame on the purchase and on the disposition time frame were in those ranges, 100,000 plus at the acquisition timeline and 200,000 plus, depending on the demographic and the class of the asset. It was between 200 and 300,000 a unit. So that is a very relevant metric for you to look at when you are looking at the classic workforce housing that we mostly space that we are in, and then the replacement cost or the construction cost. That is, you want to understand that you're buying it for 140, 150,000 a door, and it takes 250 to 300,000 to build a new one. So you want to understand that delta in that particular market and at the current costs on how much more does it cost to build one, and if there is development, then the rents would have to reflect that much higher cost of construction for them to be able to justify the development, and therefore there will be a big delta between what you are paying for the workforce housing asset versus the rents that could be derived from a new construction or a development project.
Got to unmute myself. That's very helpful there, Tariq. So I appreciate that. I don't think you probably have anything else to add there, because Tariq pretty much covered that pretty thoroughly.
Yeah, absolutely. Just on the construction cost per unit, I want to highlight that the market has completely changed on the labor market and construction cost market, and if you don't know what to use, make sure you team up or partner with someone or get sound consultation advice on what those true numbers are. We have seen our cost per unit, for example, similar scope, almost go up 2x in some cases to do an interior improvement. That will significantly impact what type of rent you're able to derive, and obviously the overall return on your investment. If it's going to cost more to upgrade these interior units, you're probably going to end up doing fewer upgrades. Therefore, you can't drive as much rent that you originally thought, and maybe your revenue growth won't be as significant as you originally thought because everything costs more. Another thing is when you are going into a new market, and it's a growing market, there's competition. There's competition for labor. There's competition for all these materials and all these supply chain mechanisms that are in place. And you have to factor that into your underwriting to make sure you have correct buffer factors in there to make sure you're able to kind of navigate and circumvent some of this headwind you may experience when you're going into these new growing markets, for example, a Dallas or Salt Lake City.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what both you guys have said here. If I wanted to take one step further to give people like a real idea of cost per square foot and how it's 2x'd, out here in Boston, I do some development work as well when we're not fully focused on multifamily. First one I built was around $200 a square foot. And then you had the great inflation going on in 2022. It was $400 a square foot to build a like-for-like asset. Now, I have seen more recently that's receding a bit just because there are a lot of inventory coming online in Q1 of 2023. So hopefully that should be bringing down our construction costs, but it will probably never get back to the pre-COVID levels because it's just an inherent thing that cost will increase. But yeah, it's always a moving variable that really has a major impact on underwriting depending upon the type of asset we're working on. Okay, well, that's been helpful here, guys. I'm going to shift us in then to the next one that we have here because we're already 15 minutes through. And so this one is another one that's kind of near and dear to my heart. And I'm not sure if it's fully seen on the screen. So pardon our issues here, guys. This is our first time utilizing this platform, so we're going to get it fixed for the next webinar. But there's actually 5 questions in this deck, and it's not showing all 5. So I'm going to read them off to you guys. Number of units or tenants there, physical occupancy, then financial occupancy, if a lease audit's been done, and what are the third-party contracts. And, that's really from just beginner questions all the way down to more advanced ones, because I think the normal person is not asking about a lease audit or the third-party contracts. So I'll turn it over to you guys and let you voice this over.
Right. I mean, again, you're just comparing apples to apples. The broker tells you it's 100 units and you go walk the property, ends up being 95. Of course, it's going to impact your overall financial model because you're not generating revenue on 5 additional units. So it's a simple inspection when you go and put your eyes on every single interior unit and to make sure that it's an apples to apples comparison. What is a physical occupancy? The same thing. There may be a lot of skips, or maybe a lot of vacant units or down units that were not correctly disclosed in the offering memorandum that the broker gave you or the seller may have presented to you. So that's why it's so important to go put your eyes on the property to get a true comparison of how many operational units you're going to have. And then what you'll find too is that a lot of the cases, there are more down units than you were told. And you have to factor that cost to rehab that unit up to the condition you need to hit the rents you want to hit. And you have to factor that additional cost it's going to take. And a lot of times this has impacted a return profile in a significant amount in some of these more rougher properties that we have purchased in the past. So again, that's why it's so important to be very diligent in your interior inspection and make sure you have someone on your team to put eyes on every single interior property. And with the financial occupancy,
before you get into the financial occupancy, on the physical side, I'll just tacking on to what you have already highlighted, Ivan. There oftentimes, especially in these older assets, the 70s, 80s assets, there are units that are offline. Whether, maybe it's a 100-unit property, but there is one unit that is used as an office and there is one unit that is used as a model unit. So those are 2 non-revenue units unless you make a plan to bring them online and convert them to a revenue unit. So that is a key consideration, the office, model unit. And sometimes what happens is that, there's an issue with the unit, stays vacant for a long time, they start to store stuff in it, and then it becomes a storage unit. So we have had properties where there are a couple of units that are just purely storage units, just with stuff from floor to ceiling. Everything else has been stripped off from the unit, all the counters, the appliances, even the electrical panel, everything is gone, but it's just space that is being used for storage of appliances and other hardware. So those things, as Ivan indicated, physical walkthrough of each of the units is critical for you to understand if a property being marketed as a 100-unit property, if those 100 are revenue units or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when it comes to the financial occupancy of the property or economic occupancy is ideally, if you can get access to the bank statements to truly understand the income coming into the property and make sure that correlates to the rent roll for the actual rent amount, then you can validate whether or not it's truly collecting what they say it's collecting. Unfortunately, there is fraud that goes on in this business, and we have encountered some scenarios where we get into a property and they say it's collecting this and this and this and the month that we were purchasing it, and then automatically all of a sudden the income is like 10 to 15, 20% less than what they were making a month prior. And we didn't do anything to the property and no one's left. And we're scratching our heads, what is going on? And so you want to do the best you can to be a forensic scientist, if you will, and really peel back the layers to truly understand what the income is. And so that's an income statement study, ideally a bank statement study as well, and make sure they all correlate. And you can see if there's any gaps or holes in the financial documents to truly understand what this property is generating in revenue and ultimately what it's generating from an NOI basis. And then that's where the lease audit has been done. Again, someone has to look at every single lease and make sure the rent rate that was signed on, one thing, make sure the rent rate that was agreed upon and signed on is reflected in the rent roll. Additionally, want to make sure that if they say there are in a 100-unit property and there's 95% occupancy, so there's 95 leases, there should be 95 signed leases. A lot of times you go into these properties that say it's 95% physical, and you'll see that maybe only 80 of the 95 are on signed leases, and you have 15 on month to month. So there's 15 people on a month-to-month basis, and that creates additional exposure that you might incur when you take on the property, and these 15 people just end up leaving overnight. You don't have as much security there. So that's why it's so important to do a lease audit, and that's another thing you're looking for. Additionally, when you're looking at the lease, going through all the different leases, you're getting a feel and understanding of the demographic that you're actually truly going to inherit with this property. Meaning, what type of jobs do they work in? What type of credit do they have? What has been their rental history overall? Additionally, you're going to be looking at the delinquency number, and this is kind of a hidden thing. I don't think people always take a look at delinquency. That delinquency is that dead weight that is sitting on your property, where these people are not paying rent and they're sitting there. And especially during COVID, when all these rent assistance programs came out, where people can get money from the government to pay for their rent, and they're waiting on the government to cut them a check, and they can legally stay in the property while they're waiting on the government to pay for the check. And it took a long time to get the money, so our delinquency continued to grow and grow and grow. And so that is a problem that you're going to inherit, and you're going to be experiencing the same thing in your velocity of revenue, your income, the amount of income you can receive, and when you think you're going to receive it may take longer, and so that will affect your financial model overall. Also, if you have a lot of delinquency and you have a delinquency issue, you got to factor that in on turn costs, because you see you're probably going to have to evict a lot of people and bring down the hammer, so to speak, sooner than later. And you have to build that in and book that into your overall rehab costs, because that delinquency comes with the price. Yeah, you can get the people out. You can see that as an opportunity. Oh, I can get all these non-paying tenants out quickly, especially with the COVID restrictions are now lifted, and it's easier to get people out. The courts are allowing for evictions to happen on a much quicker basis than it was here a couple of years ago. Yeah, you can get them out quicker and you can raise the rents, but I bet these units may cost more than you expected to rehab, and you don't have as many renewals that you thought you're going to have. So you have to factor that into your overall rehab costs and into your overall financial model.
So one question I have for you there, just as a quick follow-up, you mentioned COVID, and I'm glad we have escaped COVID now. What would you guys say was the toughest property you had to manage when it comes to, okay, you have physical occupancy of maybe 98, 100%, but your financial occupancy might be down to, say, 70, 75%. How did you guys manage through that in order to ensure that you didn't have to make a capital call, or you could continue to at least be in a positive 1.0 or better DSCR?
I mean, it's a great question, kind of getting off topic a little bit, because we're here to talk about due diligence. But, there are a lot of incentives that we try to create, or the property management company create, to get the tenant to go and sign up for the free check. It's interesting how, all the free money was out there, and a lot of people simply were lazy and they didn't want to go do it. So you would basically fill out the paperwork and tell them, if you sign up now, or if you sign up now, maybe we'll give you some type of like a free gift card or something like that. So you had to get creative to incentivize people to want to sign up for the rental assistance. So that was kind of one way that we were able to help make sure the money was still coming in. A lot of it too is just understanding the process on the back end. Our managers are really, really involved with the city level, the county level, the federal level, to make sure that we're on top of when these checks are coming in, and we're able to track the overall cash flow from these different assistance programs, and make sure we understood from a projected basis where we're going to be in an ongoing basis. But again, that goes back to still having conservative underwriting up front. Make sure you have enough capital set aside to weather any type of storm, if it's COVID or any other type of thing in any other type of market we're in or situation we're in. So we had reserves that we were managing, as well as we, at that time, stopped distributions to make sure we were able to preserve our capital to allocate towards these gaps that we may have experienced overall. But long story short, we did have a lot of delinquency that built up. We learned that burning down that delinquency comes with additional costs. Again, we have capital reserves to support that. We're still able to burn down the delinquency, and it got up to really bad numbers, in like 166 unit, over $100,000 delinquency, burned it all the way back down to 25,000, and still were able to rehab the property, improve the NOI, and still sell it at a price point that beat our projected best returns overall.
No, that's great. I guess to steer us back onto the topic, and I know I was the one that took us off topic, so my apologies, everyone. The one other additional question I think that fits within this area is third-party contracts.
Yep.
Really, what are those? Where's the opportunity that sits within those third-party contracts?
Right. With a lot of properties have a third-party laundry contract, where basically they are allowing the third party to come in to manage these washer and dryer units that for in exchange for, they're going to manage it, and they'll keep the revenue share model where they'll keep a portion of the income that comes in for in exchange for their services. But a lot of times these contracts may be in a situation where you can't get out of them, or you may want to take that over. And so you can implement your own financial model as a way to earn additional income and bring that in-house. So you need to understand what you're getting into. And once you realize what the contract says, you'll make an assessment whether or not you can get out once you acquire the property. And a lot of times you can't get out. So you have to just, it is what it is, and you have to accept the income that you project you're going to get based upon the historicals. Other cases, the property management company may have some tricks up their sleeves to help you get out of these contracts, and you can implement your own washer dryer program. And like some properties where we have washer dryer centers, but we want to put them all on the inside of the units instead. So we want to get out of the contracts. We can put them inside the units and earn additional premium on our rent bumps. So you just need to understand, what that entails from a contract standpoint. Other contracts would be security contracts. Look at the validity of the security contracts, not only for those people that do security patrols, but security systems, internet contracts, whether or not you have one or you don't have one. There's cable and internet packages you can get, where you would sign a contract with a third party, and in exchange for marketing their services and selling their services, you get a huge check up front that you can then apply to your financial model as a way to earn additional income. I wouldn't underwrite that, but I understand if I have that opportunity or not. So those are some of the examples of third-party contracts that you need to understand. Another unique case for our Salt Lake City property actually is we have a restaurant in one of our apartments in Salt Lake City. So we did a thorough analysis of what that lease says and what type of rent bumps we're going to incur with that third-party lease throughout to implement throughout our financial model. So that is another third-party contract example that we had to go through.
That's pretty interesting. So honestly, if I'm a passive investor, I can view a third-party contract as really a lot of upside profit potential, depending upon the different phases it might be in the life cycle of management. If it's a laundry contract and you're locked in for 10 years, okay, maybe that's not the opportunity, but maybe your cable internet bill, that's something that you can convert over, and now you're able to make an extra, let's say $30 a unit a month off that from profit. Is that the right way to think about it?
That's it. Exactly.
Perfect.
Right. And then on, with reference to laundry contracts and some of these other third-party contracts that might be longer-term contracts, if it makes economic sense for you as a buyer for us as a buyer to get out of that contract, you can always, yes, it might be a longer-term contract and it is, required to be transferred to the new owner, but you can always talk a buyout clause, negotiate a buyout amount with the third-party vendor. So, and that's something that can be done, that we have done. So just be aware of that if it says there are 9 years remaining on the term, does not mean that you have to stick with it. Just approach the vendor and the provider and see if there's an opportunity to buy them out of the remaining term and terminate the contract.
Okay. Well, no, thank you guys. I think that was very detailed for this particular slide. We are halfway through and we are still focused on staying under an hour. So I want to move us along to the next slide of kind of, this is getting into the rehab plan or the updating said units. And so there's some particular questions that have occurred on prior projects that we've dealt with and upcoming projects when we're doing the underwriting of, A, what needs to be updated? And then if it needs to be updated, what requires permits or what could be considered kind of a like for like asset. So no additional permits are required. And then, depending upon the city that we're in, some people, some cities might be very stringent on the level of permits and how long that takes. Others might be more lenient. And so it's always good to understand what is that estimated timeline to obtain said permits, because that will ultimately dictate your rent price if you're not able to update said unit. So can you guys go into a little bit more detail on how to properly answer this for potential investors?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you're doing a physical inspection of a property, of course, you want to have your property management company there. And a lot of times they would coordinate the whole inspection process, or we would coordinate the whole inspection process where we would bring in our own third parties. 9 times out of 10, we like to work through the property management company, let them manage the due diligence process, but sometimes may have been advantageous for us to do the same. But we do want to make sure we have an additional third party there, a general contractor, as you're saying, someone knowledgeable in that submarket who does understand the permitting process, and who is tied and plugged into all the various vendors and contractors and workers that you need to implement a rehab business plan. So when you go in and schedule out all the inspections, you want to make sure it's a coordinated effort between the property broker, as well as with the property manager and all the inspectors. Coordinated effort. We all show up on property at a certain time. We brief up the plan and we send everyone off. We have your contractor that look at the roof, look at the plumbing, look at the electrical, look at the foundation, look at the exterior condition, and all the interior conditions, right? So when looking at the roof, you want to have a licensed contractor look at the roof and truly validate what type of roofing material it is, try to assess the age of the roofing material, and also how many layers of roofing material there are. It's a lot of times these roofers, they have access to Google imagery that has been, every year there's a new image, and they can go back year by year by year by year and see what type of roof compensation material was used, and they can then therefore make a determination when that roof was upgraded. Because, for example, one year it may have been modified bitumen, which is like an asphalt or a kind of a shingle looking material that's rolled out in sheets. Then the next year they put a TPO material on top, was like really thick rubbery plastic material on top. And like, oh, between year 16 and 17, I saw it went from this roof to that roof. So you want to find a roofing contractor that really understands that, to give you a true sense of how old that roof is. And then how many layers, because that will greatly impact the cost if you had to replace a roof, on how many layers. And in some cases we had like 3, 4, 5, or 6 layers in some of these buildings that we rehabbed over the years. And that, of course, affected the cost. So that's roofing. And electrical, I really want to emphasize this, especially when these older assets, Class C assets. There was a time where aluminum wiring was being used, and that is a very hazardous type of material to use, because it could arc and this arc can create fires anywhere there's like switches or outlets or receptacles. And so you really want to be aware of that, and want to make sure you have a thorough inspection of all the wiring, and do spot checks, but all the type of wiring throughout the property. So you may be, you're going through your physical inspection, you're opening the outlets, and you're looking at the wiring to say, is that aluminum or is that copper? And you're doing a sampling throughout the property to kind of assess if all of the wiring from the switches to the receptacles is aluminum and or copper. However, from the box to the actual unit, from the outside box, from the source of the power line to the outside box to the interior, some cases that has been aluminum, and have learned that actually contractors still use aluminum for the bigger type of power supplies, but we're talking about the smaller wiring that goes from the inside fuse box to the switch and to the receptacle. That cannot be aluminum, or if it is, you have to find a way to mitigate that using it's called a pigtail or Kolar type device that would help minimize the arcing. But in today's day and age, when I want to talk about insurance, aluminum wiring is a huge red flag. And the insurance market is becoming more and more, it's becoming harder, like a hard market where pricing is getting more and more stiff and more significant and higher. And in these days, I would stay away from properties with aluminum wiring, or make sure you have built into your budget a way to replace that wiring, understand what that cost is just on aluminum wiring. The second thing is the panels. Want to make sure that the panels are not Federal Pacific, or Zinsco is the other brand. Federal Pacific and Zinsco are another huge red flag items for insurance companies, and they find that to be a lot of liability at stake because those spark and arc and cause fires as well. And so if you see all the panels with that, then you're going to have to replace them. And then that's when you may have to go out and you're going to go out and get permits to replace the panels, which is another more expensive process. And when it comes to water heaters, you want to understand the age of the water heaters. And again, technically you're supposed to get permits in most municipalities for water heaters and understand the extra cost to do that. All the HVAC systems, it doesn't talk about the mechanical, the outside unit, the interior unit, understand the age of that, the lifespan of that, and also budget in replacing the HVAC units on a percentage basis. We use around 10 to 15% or so per year, and understand the cost to replace those. It may be the inside unit, outside unit, or both. And again, costs have gone up significantly to replace those units. Of course, you can find cost-effective ways. You can bring on a maintenance supervisor who's licensed. You can get maybe the product, the inside, outside unit wholesale costs, but it's still, you need to have a thorough inspection, understand what all of the condition is of all those components. For the older properties that have boiler and chiller, which I highly recommend, just stay away from those properties and run. It's not worth your time and wait to get into property boiler chiller. We currently own one. Thank God it's doing fine, but those things are expensive and they cost a lot to replace and also cost a lot to maintain. And these older buildings have these very old archaic systems where you're pushing out cold water or hot water to heat and cool the property. Then you have this blower system inside the units that's pulling the air around the pipe off to blow into the units. A lot of moving parts and a lot of it's just old and it doesn't work. It's not efficient and it costs more to run these properties. But bring in licensed contractors to put their eyes on these boiler and chillers and truly understand what is the physical condition and what you will need to do to ensure the longevity, the life, to ensure you secure the lifespan of that property for the time period you're holding it, right? You don't want to make it brand new. Maybe you don't want to replace it, but how much do I need to put into those systems to make sure we can keep the property functional? So that is another thing you really want to do a deep dive on and make sure you truly understand what's going on with the boiler and chiller. So let's go plumbing. The plumbing lines themselves. Do we have PVC? Do we have iron cast? Do you have, in some cases, concrete type plumbing? So you're going to bring in a plumber with a scope, a camera, and they're going to put camera all of the main sewer lines and understand what is the composition of these drain lines, because you can make some assessments based upon the imagery, based upon what the plumber is seeing of that. Again, you're going to have some plumbing issues. You may see roots going through the actual plumbing line. You may see collapsed plumbing lines, and which is kind of maybe the reason why you're getting a lot of backups in a certain building. You may see misaligned type plumbing lines where you have concrete plumbing where it's kind of sliding in and one end is going into another, like a male to female type connection, and where roots like to get in there. You can make an assessment of what you're embarking when you do a physical inspection of all the main sewer drain lines. And then again, that will factor back into your overall rehab plan and make sure you have allocated numbers set aside in case one of those lines need to be replaced. Also with the water lines, do you have galvanized pipe or do you have copper pipe? How old are those water lines? We had in these 70s buildings where one side of the property, there was always a leak in the water line, and these water lines because of the expanding and contraction over time weakens that water line that causes leaks. And guess what? It is a slab property, and these leaks are underneath the slab. So then you have to jackhammer the ground to expose that water line to go in for a plumber to go in and replace it. Very costly event, right? And try to get as much intel from that manager. By the way, when you're on these inspections, those property managers are your best friends. I mean, promise them everything. Bring them coffee, whatever you need to do to get the information out of them. Because a lot of them will tell you everything. They'll open the book and they'll tell you. A lot of them won't. It kind of depends how well managed and trained they are, but do the best you can to get intel from them, and they'll tell you some of the recurring problems. Hey, yeah, this building we have these multiple, every winter we have these type of water leaks. Oh, hey, in this building over here we have multiple leaks from this building. And on the leak thing, make sure you see, a lot of property managers keep a leak log, and they will show you physically on the roof itself where these leaks have occurred, and they'll put a date next to it. And you can see trend data of, oh, in this building we have multiple leaks. Probably going to have to replace that roof here during our holding period. And you can factor that in again to your overall budget and rehab plan. How are we doing, Dan? Keep going? Can't hear you, but I'll keep going.
Yeah, sorry, I'm unmuted now. A lot of information. That's very detailed, and that's fantastic. I wish I was writing this all down, because this was even newer information that I didn't even know. So thank you for that. Tariq, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add is that, the very first question there, what needs to be updated, a lot of time the focus is on upgrading the interiors of the units and making them comparable to other comps in the area to get a rent bump that you may be able to achieve compared to those comps in the area. But some of these exterior items, a lot of these items that Ivan has mentioned, that the roofs, the electrical panels, the plumbing, those things can be very costly. And you want to be budgeted for these if these are things that you're going to have to address during your hold period. And these would, in addition to those, there could be siding or windows. There are properties that have old windows that may need to be replaced. Siding that may be rotting, so that may need to be addressed or replaced. If there's a pool or pools on the property, what condition are those in? The mechanicals of the pool system and the pool itself. So these things in the parking lot, the dumpster areas. So all of those things can add up, could be big ticket items that can add up very quickly, unless you are really budgeting for those, understand if these are things that need to be addressed and budget for them. And there could be occasions where either the lender or the insurance company, may ask you or require you to spend money and bring them up to certain standard. The panels was the example that Ivan gave earlier, but a lender, and that is something, the panels could be required by the insurance company or the lender, but the lender may require, the restriping or replacement of the parking lot, the redoing the parking lot, and that could be expensive. So those things that just getting your arms around those and properly budgeting for them is the key thing.
Yeah, and understand the impact based upon the condition and inspection, what kind of impact that'll have on your insurance cost. Going back to the panels, if they say you don't have to replace them, but your insurance cost is going to go up by 30%, and that 30% increase hits the bottom line, and it's probably going to impact your loan proceeds, right? Which then overall impact the financial model. So you really got to understand and do the best you can before obviously you get into the contract, right? Get the most intel you can before you actually get to this point. Anyways, you should have known this before you got into the contract. But if you didn't, then now you're here, you got to understand what kind of impact it'll have on your insurance costs.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great there, guys. Time permitting, we've got 15 minutes left. So I'm going to hop to this next one, and we can go through this one, I think, a bit faster so that we can tackle the final two questions in more detail. So this one's really just trying to understand, is there an on-site, leasing office? What's the condition of that office? And then tying into the property manager, are they going to be living on the property? Or how do you manage said assets, especially if, say, it's in Dallas-Fort Worth and none of us currently live in Dallas-Fort Worth? So what's kind of the solution there?
Sure. I mean, is there an office on the property? Of course, you want to go. You should, again, know before you go into the property. You probably secret shop this property already. But, this day and age, for me, the office is the first impression. You want to make sure you have a very good office, a very presentable office, a functional office. Functional not only, for your managers, make sure that they have a place that they like to work and enjoy to work in every day, but functional for tenants to come in and sit down and have a meeting or fill out an application. So you're evaluating this during the due diligence phase. Well, the office need to be upgraded. Simply, you can look at it and, or if you don't understand taste and what looks good and what doesn't look good, bring in, a friend or partner in your team to make an assessment if the office needs to be upgraded or not. A lot of times you'll see that properties use interior units as an office, like Tariq mentioned earlier. Maybe make an assessment to see if there's another common area that you can maybe convert into office space to then open up that current office to a rentable unit. Will the property manager live on the property? I mean, that's a question with the new property management company, or if you're keeping the property management company, you would try to assess that beforehand. Let me tell you, I always encourage that, and I always find a way to incentivize the manager to live on the property, because inherently they're going to treat that property as their home, especially if they have a family. They want that property to be nice for not only themselves, but their family. So they're going to go the extra mile to make sure the property stays clean, to make sure all the riffraff is being managed and handled well, to make sure that they don't bring in bad tenants. So always trying to find a way to get property managers to live on the property. And it's happened in numerous cases. In one property we had in Oklahoma City called the Eleanor, the managers lived there for 20 plus years. And let me tell you, the net result is we had basically zero delinquency. We always hit the rent, and we always were collected, and we're always, 94, 95% occupied, because she lived on that property and she treated it as her own home as it was. So those are some of the key things there when it comes to office and property manager.
Tariq, anything else to add, or else should we just hop to the next few slides? You're muted, Tariq.
All right. As Evan mentioned, we have had instances where we have, revenue units being used as office and found a space to move the office to. We have other instances where, we have redone the office space, and actually, just by way of redoing office space in the common area, added a unit to the property, just because of the large space that was being utilized. So, look at it as an opportunity. As Evan said, that is the first point of contact that any potential tenant is going to have. And you do want them to be walking into a nice, welcoming space.
All right, there. That is sufficient for this one, and I love the insights there. Treating it like their home, and that's why you ultimately want to have a property manager there on site. That's the real big golden takeaway I got from that one. Let me hop to this one. This one is really centered on security. And that came in 3 different types of questions. And so I just filtered them all into this slide again. What are there security cameras around? What type of security will be provided to the property? And then during that really thorough due diligence, when you were doing the due diligence, did you actually stay overnight in a car and monitor what's going on at night at the property besides just what's going on at the day? You guys want to try and talk to that a bit more?
I mean, yeah, of course, these are all very, very important things. You can even look at the crime report online, get a sense and feel what type of crime goes on in the surrounding area before you even pursue this property. So you already kind of have an assessment, an idea of what type of crime is involved. But when it comes to security, security cameras, we like to have those at all of our properties. Not only cameras, but lighting. Make sure you assess the nighttime lighting and how well lit is the property. not only from a presentation standpoint, but from a security standpoint. So, and if you don't have lights, you got to make sure you incorporate that into your rehab budget. Have you monitored the activities that go on the property? Both, of course, yeah. I mean, you want to go to these properties at night, during the week and also on the weekends, right? And you want to go to the property during the day and kind of get a feel for, like, if there's a lot of cars there during the day, does that mean they're not working, or all these people work at night? I mean, if like over half of the place has cars in it, I'm always like, I wonder if these people have jobs. Like, what are they doing? You know? And if they're not working, then how are they going to pay rent? Right? So that's always a question in my mind. But then when you go at night, of course, you want to see if people have loud parties and there's, loud music, or people having parties in the parking lot. Also, you want to see, like, what is allowed? What is the overall culture on this property? Do you have a lot of people just hanging out and trashing the property at night or during the day? Are kids just jumping off the brick walls all over the place and riding their bikes and throwing them in the playground and walking off and leave them there? You're kind of getting a sense of feel of the overall culture and feel for the property, both when you look at it from both day and night.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Tariq, any other thoughts there?
No, just as Ivan said, just getting an understanding, a feel for the activity at the property day and night is important. There have been times, especially early on when we were buying here in Oklahoma City, that is where Ivan and I both are. I have gone and sat at the convenience store around the corner just to see what kind of foot traffic is there.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. It's incredible when you just use the art of visual learning to assess what's going on. It's amazing what you can actually uncover versus everything can look good on paper. You really have to get into the weeds sometimes and evaluate it. So I think we're actually on to the last set of questions, which we're running on time now. This comes to the comp standpoint. And it's once again broken into three areas. The first one is the most general. What are the rental comps in the area? But then specifically to that, it's just like, what are the types of amenities compared to a like-for-like asset in the area? And then parking, in parking could be a hot commodity depending upon the market that you're in. So what is the parking setup compared to another like-for-like asset in the area?
Yeah.
Who wants to take the first crack at that one?
I'll add a few thoughts here on that. Just had another thought that came to mind. When you're doing the visual interior inspections, talk to the tenants, befriend them. They'll give you a lot of intel as well. So just want to throw that out. Just came to my mind. So when it comes to rental comps in the area, how does a property comp from a many standpoints? So really the basis to these questions for me is I'm putting myself in the mind of a potential tenant living on the property. And I'm trying to understand the demographic that I'm appealing to, and what are the things that they like or don't like and care about, don't care about. Is this a family-based property? Do we have a lot of 1 beds, or do we have a lot of 2 beds and maybe some 3 beds? And that'll kind of determine what type of amenities you want to have on the property. Is this property have a pool? And if they have the pool, do people want to congregate on the weekends and have barbecues? So, or is this a pet-based property? So if it's pet-based, you want to make sure you have a pet area, right? And then also it comes down to the overall total cost. The tenant's thinking about not just the price per square foot, right? They're looking at overall cost for them to live in this property. So they're looking at what am I going to get for my money? So if I live here, I'm going to get a dog park. I'm going to get a nice pool. I'm going to get a place to hang out with my friends. I'm actually going to like to hang out here. I'm actually going to feel like I want to invite my family over because they have all these cool amenities that I can hang out on a weekend or after work and enjoy being here. And therefore, I'm willing to pay for that. Right. And then when it comes to additional income, you're looking for ways to earn additional income that's comparable to other like-kind properties in the surrounding area. And you understand, are they charging additional pet fee? How they are charging it? Is it a flat fee per month? Or is it like an upfront fee, or do they charge additional rent income? So understand that. What kind of dog park do they have? Do they have a better dog park than you? And then you understand the demographic too. Like some demographics want a tech package as an amenity versus not. And that's becoming actually more and more common actually now in the C space, even where it's kind of becoming a standard just to make sure you have a good tech package plan, and you have to budget that into your rehab cost overall. And when it comes to parking, yeah, you're looking at the tenant to parking ratio and make sure you have enough parking spaces. And in a lot of cases, these properties were built before certain codes were put in where you didn't have to have so many parking spaces. And therefore you have limited parking, and that's going to impact not only for your tenants on where they're going to park, but can you charge additional income to have reserved parking? And then covered parking is another way to earn additional income. Do the surrounding properties, are they charging for covered parking, which is additional amenity? So those are some of the things that I think about when I see these questions here.
Yeah, and I think there's one other thing I'd like to add in is when we're doing those rental comps, it's really important to understand how those other comparable properties are charging their rent. Is it an all expenses paid property, or is it a partial expenses paid property in which they'll pay for the gas and electric, but you have to pay water and internet cable? So that's another thing that can really sway what a rental comp looks like. And you have to get into the details and call those properties, acting like you might want to be a tenant, to understand how it would fully bake out as a potential tenant.
100%.
Tariq, anything else you got there?
Just what Ivan already touched on it, but getting input from the current staff and especially the tenants on at the property on what kind of amenities they would want, and if there was an amenity to be added or improved, which one would that be? Because it's input from them that the demographic profile from the comp might be different for the particular property that you're on, that you are going through the diligence on. So getting that input directly from the tenants is critical.
Well, no, hey, this has been, once again, fantastic. And as I look through the questions, I'm pretty sure we answered all of them. There's a few more that trickled in, but for the sake of time, I want to keep us under.
Dan, listen, I want to make a point here on something.
Yeah.
One thing I think it's one of the main things I think is key. Now, just understanding the numbers, the physical condition, all this stuff we just discussed here. But also you need to assess operational execution viability of your plan. How complicated is it? And if it's complicated, do you have the appropriate processes and team members and people in place to be able to execute this plan that you say you're going to execute? How are you actually going to pull this off? And who's in charge of that plan? And what is their track record and ability to implement and execute that plan? Do they understand how to manage rehab budgets? Do they understand all of the inner workings of a property? Do they understand how to manage people? Do they, and how many units are you going to turn on a monthly basis? How viable is that plan? So you're going to have one crew and you're going to turn 20 units per month, or you have two crews, but you're going to turn 20 units, but they're all extremely rough and they're down. So you think you can still get through 20 units per month? Like, assess that, because that right there will obviously impact your overall financial model. If you can't if you're banking on turning 20 units, you only turn 5, guess what? You're going to be behind the power curve. So look at it from an operational standpoint, operational execution standpoint, and assess to see how viable it is and whether or not you can actually pull it off.
Amen. That's beautiful. And thank you for that. Tariq, do you have any other final comments? If not, I'll hop to kind of our final slide.
No, you can just wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah. So then, and sorry for the formatting here, guys. Again, we're going to get this fixed on future webinars. It's a new streaming service for us, so we'll get it fixed here. But our final kind of call to action, and just I wanted to share it with you guys while we have your attention, is Anthem has started a book club. And the book club in general is just focused on creating more sophisticated investors or just more well-rounded individuals on some thought pieces. And so our January one was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Our February focus is The Richest Man in Babylon. So I've got those copies right here. And for a select number of people, if they're interested, I suggest you scan the QR code and let us know of your interest, and we'll get you involved in our book club. It's one book a month. We can then talk about it amongst each other in our community, and hopefully it helps us all learn and grow. So hopefully my rambling on has allowed you enough time to scan the QR code. If not, you know where to find us at invest@anthemcp.com, or you can just visit us at anthemcp.com and get in contact with us there. But if that's everything, I've intrigued. Any other final comments before we say goodbye?
That is all.
That is all.
Great.
Just happy to be here and be part of the team to answer some of these questions.
Awesome. Well, everyone that is listening here, thank you for shooting us the questions in advance. That allowed for us to better prepare the answers for you. Once again, if you have more questions, and I captured a few of them here that were coming in, we'll follow up with you individually. If not, we're going to see you guys in February. Sorry, we ran 33 seconds over in our guaranteed office hour, but we'll talk to you guys in February, if not before then. Have a good one. Bye-bye.